My name is Saee Ghule, and I'm a master's student at Wageningen University. And I did my master's thesis within the LODESTAR project. And the title of my thesis was Bridging the Gap Between Early Warning Communication and Community Response to Urban Flooding in Bengaluru. What factors affect community response? So, I will be starting with a short introduction of the problem in Bangalore, followed by a problem statement and my research questions, then the conceptual framework on which my study was based, and the methodology used to obtain those answers, and then finally, key findings of my study, and conclusion, and then recommendations and future research. Starting with a short introduction, maybe most of you would already know about this issue. Bangalore is a metropolitan city situated in the southern part of India in the state of Karnataka at an elevation of 975 meters. And it was designated as a tech hub by the government of India, which saw unchecked migration and then subsequent construction boom in the city. The population increased from 6 million in 2001 to 12 million in 2024. Once known as a garden city with numerous lakes and water channels collecting them, which were known as Rajakalu ways, now these water bodies are encroached because of the increasing demand for infrastructure. This puts immense pressure on the drainage system of the city, especially when there is high rainfall, and the result is inundation in parts of the city almost every year during monsoon. To mitigate this problem, various government bodies have taken several measures, such as making a climate action plan or upgradation of the sewer system. We also have an active early warning system, as you might know, with an urban flood model. And I will not go into the detail of which government body has taken which kind of measures, but I would like to highlight two important points that form the problem statement of my thesis, which is that the management of this disaster follows a typical top-down approach with high focus on technological solutions that fix the immediate problem at hand, which we also call as reactive approach. So the proactive approach for managing floods is missing here, and most importantly, the second one, the social dimension, is entirely missing from the discussion, which is why I chose to do my thesis on this topic. So this brings us to my research questions. While my main general research question addresses the gap between information dissemination from early warning system and residents' response to flood warning. It is further divided into four specific research questions. The first one explores the different information sources from which people receive information about floods. The second one is based on threat appraisal, based on awareness and emotional reception to flood risk information. The third one is based on coping appraisal, which has two components: reliance on the authorities and reliance on themselves for protection from floods. And finally, the fourth sub research question is about past experiences, how past experiences affect people's response to floods. Since past experience has been known to greatly affect people's perception and response, I chose to do chose to chose a specific research question for past experiences. So this is the conceptual framework on which my study was based. It was loosely based on what we call as protection motivation theory. Now, protection motivation theory was initially proposed for medical studies. It has two major components. The first one is threat appraisal, how people perceive the threat, which we also call as risk perception. And the second one is coping appraisal, that is uh, how people decide on how to respond to threat or how to protect themselves from the threat. So this diagram here on the left describes how each of the terms in research questions were operationalized. So first of all, we have sources of information, and then for awareness, it was operationalized as awareness and knowledge of floods and how to respond to them. Then for emotional reception, I had two components, which is denial of the risk and emotional reaction to it. Then for reliance on authorities, it was operationalized as belief in warning and trust in authorities. And finally, reliance on self was operationalized as perceived self efficacy, that is, confidence in oneself to protect oneself from floods. Then, protective response efficacy, that is, the confidence in the measures that they are taking to protect themselves. And finally, protective response cost, that is, the effort required to take those measures. So, in short, to answer the research questions of my study, I prepared a survey questionnaire which was first designed in English and then translated to Kannada. It was then circulated both online and in person, and in total, 83 responses were collected and analyzed for the results. Now I will give you a short demographic structure of my respondents because this affects the generalizability of my study, and it is also one of the limitations. So as we can see, my respondents were skewed when it came to age range and education, with most of the respondents falling in the youth category, that is 21 to 40 years of age group. And in terms of education, most of the respondents were had at least graduation as minimum level of education. Okay, now moving on to the key findings. This diagram here summarizes responses on used and preferred sources of early warning by the respondents. As you can see, TV is the most used source for information, followed by social media and internet. Most people also prefer that they receive the early warning via SMS and call alerts. And another important finding is that the official source of information, that is Bengaluru Megha Sandesha app and Bengaluru Varunamitra website, was not used by any of the respondents for updates on flood. At least 78% people were not aware of this source of communication, and those who were aware had never accessed it. Perhaps because maybe it is too much effort to download a separate app or visit a separate website to when information is available on fingertips on Google search. So that's the main findings about sources of information. Then, when it came to people's perception, a very good general awareness was seen among the respondents on causes of floods and how to respond to them. Most of the people believe that frequency of flood was more than once a year. And respondents were not in denial of the threat. Most also felt worried on hearing about the floods. However, a sizable portion of the respondents uh, think that the floods will not affect them personally. Now, there can be several reasons which can explain this. Maybe because of risk normalization, that is low perceived severity of floods, or because the thought of risk is psychologically unsettling, or maybe because since different parts of the city are flooded, not everyone is at the same risk. Then coming to the coping appraisal, many people have blamed that mismanagement by the government is a cause for the flood, and so they don't seem that they trust the government, and somehow past experiences has worsened this state. People with past experiences seem to have lowered their trust in the government, and uh, since they do not rely on the authorities, they tend to rely on themselves, with a majority of them showing confidence in one's ability to protect themselves from flood. One of the reasons behind this could be the lack of clear responsibility attribution in disaster management. Some previous studies have also deemed responsibility attribution as one of the third component in the PMT for flood management. Another important finding was that too much efforts were required by the citizens to take action against the flood. To conclude, the following gaps were identified in information dissemination and people's response. The first one was, as we could see, a huge gap in communication. The second one was that most people do not consider that the threat to the floods will affect them personally. The third one was gap in responsibility attribution, whether people were unsure whether to trust the government and tend to rely on themselves. And finally, efforts required for taking measures were perceived as high. Now, based on these conclusions, here are some recommendations that I have recommended in my study. So, for huge gap in communication, it is important to implement a multi-source two-way communication channel where different stakeholders can collaborate and coordinate. And it is important to establish coordination among all stakeholders with clear responsibility attribution in disaster mitigation and management. And finally, raising risk perception by the use of indirect experience through TV and electronic media, which can increase the risk perception of people. Now, in my study, with past experiences, we did not find any significant difference between people who had past experiences and people who did not have past experiences. The only difference was found in trust in the authorities. In terms of risk perception, there was no significant difference. So, one of the reasons behind it could be that people nowadays have indirect experiences through TV or social media. They see images and videos of flood, and this can be constituted as an indirect experience, and this affects the perception of people. And finally, a few avenues to explore for future research. That is, since my study only identifies the gaps, it's important to investigate these gaps in detail so that we get a clearer picture of the scenario and the role of TV and electronic media in shaping perception. For example, what kind of information is available for people on these platforms and how it is shaping people's perception. Then it would be interesting to see why people are not concerned that flood will affect them personally. And finally, since my study only explores the individual psychology on these factors, it would be really interesting to see how community affects individual psychology, how community shapes their perception of floods and how they respond to floods. So that's it from my side.